and it's mostly for testing out the new camera. I got a new web camera, so giving that a try here. Trying to, mm, make sure all my equipment works and everything, and see who all comes online while I'm doing this. And I can chat with you guys if you want, if you have any questions. Working on trying to formulate my ideas for my next video. I have several ideas jotted down already. So one of them right now, I think I want to do probably tomorrow, that I've been doing a bit of research on, has to do with basically comparing what it's like being a nurse in the United States versus being a nurse in Sweden. And the aim of it is not to be comparing the two. It's not to say one is better than the other, but it's more just for information purposes, because I know when I was a brand new nurse, or not a brand new nurse, but when I was a nurse in the States and interested in moving to Sweden, I had a really hard time finding any information on nurses from the States that had moved to Sweden. The only person I could find was, there was like a blog from some nurse that had married a Swedish person, moved here, and she made 2 or 3 posts on the blog. She wasn't active on it. There wasn't really information on how to do it, or pros and cons, or any way to, prepare oneself. There were, of course, the government websites on what the test is like, but not real super detailed. And so that's one of the goals of this channel, is being able to give a perspective as a real person who's actually gone through this stuff, versus just some dry reading on some websites as to what you're supposed to do. Because there's one thing to read it and one thing to live it. And I find that a lot of people have benefited from the content that I've put out, and they've mentioned this to me both publicly and privately. And I actually have a family that I'm helping to move over here right now. They're moving here in just several days, and it happened pretty fast because we started this journey of trying to help her as a nurse get her license just, several months ago, maybe maximum 6 months probably. She's already gotten accepted into a Swedish language program here in this area of Sweden I live. And they've already found a place to live, and they're moving the whole family over from the States. So it'll be interesting to follow her story. There's several others that I'm working with, helping to get their nursing licenses here in Sweden. And so, yeah, so that's kind of the direction I'm going with this channel now. I'm trying to narrow down my niche a little bit. I know that most of my followers are actually Swedish, and so it may be that not all the information pertains to them, but I think a lot of people find it interesting to hear some of the stuff that we have to go through, because it's just like, for someone living in the United States, they may not understand what an immigrant has to go through moving to the States. It's going to be the same thing for a Swedish person who's lived here all their life and never had to go through the immigration process. I do find a lot of Swedes benefit from getting to see through the eyes of someone who is a foreigner moving here, going through the processes of trying to get a license and personal identification number, bank account. So, but like I said, the main focus of this channel right now is trying to help people that are interested in either moving here and getting acclimated, just kind of learning how you do everything. Um, Maybe perhaps offering help to those that need help. I do have a link in my bio here on the YouTube channel for people to book one-on-one coaching with me if they are a healthcare worker trying to get their license and they were educated from outside the EU and they need some guidance on that. I do have a link in the bio where you can sign up for that. I have quite a few people that are reaching out to me for this stuff now, and so I am charging a modest fee for that, because I do work a full-time job, and this YouTube stuff does take a lot of work, and I can't help everybody, unfortunately. So that's one reason why I have these videos here, is those that, either are not able to do coaching sessions with me, or I'm not able to help, at least they can hopefully dig around and find what they need to find on my channel. So yeah, I will see here if there's a way I can post something here in the chat thing. Let's see here. I'm gonna post a question in the chat. Let's see. All right, so I've put in the chat, do any of you have things that you would like me to discuss? So we'll see how that goes. Hi there. Is it DAW7563? Welcome. You are the first commenting here. So, yeah, it's exciting to see a lot of people that are getting results that have been able to help on this journey. I have a lot of ideas of stuff that I can do to help. It was a really rough time for me coming into the system, trying to get my license here and adapting to Swedish culture, despite all the research I did. Like I said, it's one thing to read about things, it's another thing to actually live it. There's not a whole lot of them. I mean, there is a lot of Americans living in Sweden, but not like a whole lot of Americans to where there's like a lot of data on, like differences of culture. There's a stereotypical stuff, but what you will find typically is most Americans that are moving to Sweden are of a certain sector of America and don't typically feel that they identify as what a stereotypical American is. So there's a difference between the travelers to Sweden and the people that are moving to Sweden. So, but there are some significant differences still. And, I feel like as an American, it's easier adapting to Swedish life than it has been for some other people that I've seen from other cultures. I work with some people from, for example, Latin America, and I find we have a lot of Middle Easterners too, but for some reason it seems to be that the ones from Latin America struggle more than the ones from the Middle East, has been my experience. I think because they are a very fun-loving, outgoing culture, they're probably generally louder than even us Americans. Because I know growing up in the States, most of my friends are Mexican and Vietnamese, and I found them to talk at a louder volume. And I know that's just one example of like cultural differences is there are some loud Swedes, but most Swedes tend to talk a little bit quieter than say the stereotypical American or a Latino or someone from the Middle East or some Asian countries. So I like sharing things like that. I hope it adds some value to the channel for people. DW7563. Ska vi se här. Bor söder om Göteborg, har följt dig ett par år nu. Do you prefer us writing in English in the chat? So they're saying in Swedish, they live south of Gothenburg and have been following my channel for a while. That's awesome. Welcome and thank you for the support and for following. Det är upp till dig. Jag kan svenska, jag kan engelska. It's up to you. I can do English or Swedish. Det är ingen fara. So gör det som är mest bekväm för dig. Do whatever is the most comfortable for you. So I can do Swedish here. It's not a problem. I can translate for those that don't speak Swedish here. I think that's the biggest thing is more Swedes speak English than Americans or English speaking people speaking Swedish. So, by the way, let me know how the audio is. Like I said, another reason I'm doing this video, it's going to be probably about an hour-long video, is kind of just testing the audio and the new camera that I bought. It's a webcam, 4K webcam. So let's see here. Zindra Shimania. Hi, as I've told you before, I was interested in the opposite. I'd like to find Swedes that immigrated to the US. When I've searched YouTube, all I found is Americans that have moved here. Hey, Zindra, have you seen, what's his name? There's quite a few, actually. They're mostly on TikTok. What's his name? Milo is his name. Let me see if I can find his name. Give me 1 second here, everybody. I'm going to see if I can find his name. Because he actually moved to America. He worked as a nurse anesthesiology nurse, traveled a lot, made a lot of good money. I don't think that the Swedish lifestyle was for him, despite being Swedish. I saw him on the news, actually. He was on an interview on the news. And it was interesting to see how he's not your typical what you would think of a Swedish person, despite growing up here. I think there's things he values and stuff, but the American lifestyle is more what he wanted and making money and all that kind of stuff. So he actually is in school now getting his CRNA, so nurse anesthetist, which is what he did in Sweden, but he's going to be able to make, if I remember correctly, I think he's going to make like 5 times the money that he would have in Sweden. And it's just like, yeah, I understand his perspective is like, yeah, you're going to pay a lot more taxes in Sweden. You make low salary, but you get the social network. But it's like, yeah, but if you're making that kind of money, you can buy anything you want. So you don't need the social network. You can save money and retire when you're like 50. So I think that's his thing. So you could check out his stuff. Then there's another lady. I don't remember her name. She's on TikTok. I don't know which part of America she moved to, but I think her husband may be a nurse too as well. But they're both Swedish. She's a nurse, and they seem to be doing really well. But she seemed to be pretty much like kind of like she's able to navigate both, like live, hang on to the Swedish and adapt to America. I mean, she can do both. Whereas Milo, I feel like he's like leans more towards, American lifestyle kind of thing is makes him more happy. So that might be somewhere to start. It is really hard to find people that have gone the other way. Also, Facebook. You can look on Facebook and look up different cities and look up like Swedish in, because I actually did that. I looked at Facebook when I thought I was going to have to move back to Texas just recently because of my father passing away and all the crazy stuff was happening. I was struggling financially here in Sweden. So I thought I'm just going to have to like go back to the States and start over. So I was looking, I didn't want to forget my Swedish skills, right? So I looked up, is there Swedish people in Dallas in Facebook? And I found groups and I actually found nurses that live there in Dallas and they're doing really well. So they're out there. It's just hard to find content, like you say, on YouTube. And that's one reason why I do this channel is hopefully the information I provide can be helpful to other people. Let's see here. I'm gonna catch up on the comments here. They're starting to come in. Let's see. And that's how you found me. I gotcha. Zindra saying she doesn't use TikTok, but maybe have to start using it since we can't find any. Go on TikTok. I'm not a TikTok person. I will say the only social media I really don't like is Snapchat. Is not my thing. TikTok, I was really resistant to do it at first, but I have it now, and I do find there's more people putting like short content out there that's like fast content. You should be able to find something. And I found a ton of Americans and connected with more people on TikTok than I have on YouTube. Like YouTube, there's a lot more social like networking, like through text message on here. But TikTok, I've actually had people reaching out and wanting to go out for coffee and talk and stuff like that. So give that a try. Zindra says, but to hear people's life stories is always interesting anyways. Yeah, exactly. I think I agree with that too. I love watching like interviews, and that's what I'm hoping to do with this channel is start doing like more interviews with people. I have planned an interview with a gentleman who's from Sweden, lives in Sweden, but has lived in America. Not a healthcare worker, has done other stuff. Very interesting to hear his perspective on things, and I think a lot of Swedes don't understand that there's a lot of diversity of thought because there's like what's called O6 corridor. So it's like I think Swedes are afraid to be honest with each other and talk. And that's kind of what I keep hearing from some of these Swedes that talk to me privately, but excuse me, they don't talk to me like online where everybody else can see, is there's a lot of diversity in thought. But because of O6 corridor, they're afraid to, complain about things or say how they feel. And so, anyway, I'm going to try to give him a platform to talk because I think it'll be very interesting to hear what he has to say. Doesn't necessarily mean I agree with everything he says or the other people will, but I think it's good to hear stories from people. It's a good way to learn and learn about humans and stuff. Let's see here. Looking through the comments here. In danger, I guess 8801 sounds good here in the bush. Usually, oh, that's good to know. Usually, live streams on YouTube have poor quality. Hi from Smoland, by the way. Oh, hello. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. Yeah. Yeah, apparently I did kinda like a test live stream with the camera audio, and the gentleman who's actually gonna be on the interview probably next week is, I think, when we're gonna do it. Um, he's actually does that has done that for a living, like, doing audio stuff, and so, we were testing out this microphone, the Yeti, and then the microphone on the new 4K webcam that I bought. And he's like, "The video's good on the webcam. The audio's terrible. It sounds like you're in the bathroom." So, we'll just stick with the Yeti microphone. Let's see here. Getting lots of good questions here. Welcome, everybody. Got 5 people online here. Let's see. Do you know the ratio between this is from DAW7563. Do you know the ratio between your followers, United States, Swedes, immigrants, others? Follow some channels with immigrants since I am curious of their views of Sweden, what they like or not in Sweden. Yeah, I do have access to that data. There's not really an easy way for me to share it on here. I'm still trying to learn how to do this live stream stuff, so I don't know all the features that are on here. But basically, the largest portion of my viewers are in Sweden. The second largest is in the United States, and the third is Norway. Then you start getting into like Netherlands and Germany or some of the other places, and then some from Denmark. But the largest amount is first Sweden and then United States. And it has to do with the algorithm, how it kicks things out. A lot of people said they had a hard time finding me, like nurses and stuff, because they want to get information on this. And they have been finding me surprisingly shocked me to find my face on Reddit. People have been copy and pasting links to my videos on Reddit, which I'm excited about, that the information is getting out there and can help people, but it was also a little intimidating. So I'm kind of a little bit shy. So seeing that was like, oh boy. And it's interesting too. I can also see the demographics of like the sex and the age of the people that are watching my videos, like how long they watch them, parts that are skipped and jumped over. I mean, there's a lot of data with YouTube that you can look at. Now, I highly recommend everybody consider starting a YouTube channel. It's kind of like there is an opportunity there for even if you're not good in front of a camera, you're not good with equipment, you know, you should have seen me in the beginning. If you haven't, it was horrible. Everybody's got to start somewhere. It's a good learning experience. Let's see here. Um, what do we got here? Grumpy Pants 021. I'm not a nurse, but did you work as a nurse in the US before moving to Sweden? Did you have to go back to nursing school in Sweden and get a Swedish nursing license? Great question, Grumpy Pants. Fun name there. Um, so yes, I was a nurse. So long story short, I worked in construction. I tried to start my own business doing landscaping. I also tried a few other businesses and all of them failed, like gutter installation on roofs. Yeah, just lots of stuff. Then I ended up going and teaching myself how to be it's called in Swedish apotekstekniker. So it's like assistant to a pharmacist. And then I got a job in retail pharmacy. And then I got a job in the hospital in the pharmacy there. And at the time I was thinking about nursing, very interested in being a helicopter nurse at the time. That was kind of like a dream to me. And the other reason I was wanting to do nursing is they do 3 shifts a week, 12-hour shifts. And to me, that was awesome because then you have more than half the week to do whatever you want to do. And you just focus on those 3 days, just work, which that is not the case here in Sweden, which is a whole nother story. Anyways, then I got a job, like I said, at the hospital. Then they told me that they had a program where they pay for nursing school. So I was like, well, why not? And then I also got extra money so that from work, basically, if I signed a contract, they would pay me for 40 hours a week, even though I worked 24 just for signing a contract. And then after that, I got a sign on bonus. So it was like a huge incentive for me to be a nurse. So I got my associate degree that way. Then I got my first job as a registered nurse with an associate degree. And I was working night shifts. So I had a lot of downtime. Like I said, I worked 3 days a week, 12-hour shifts. So I had so much free time. So those days I was off, I would work on my bachelor's, and then I got my bachelor's, and that was paid for. I did that in 13 months. Then I just worked for a long time. So I had probably 10 years of experience before I decided, because I got a back injury from taking care of a lot of stroke patients that were real heavy. And I decided I couldn't do this long term. So I decided to go back and get my master's. So I got a master's in something that doesn't even exist here in Sweden. It's called nurse practitioner. Um, I'm actually doing a bunch of research on that topic here in Sweden as well, because there's actually a nurse I found who did her thesis on the nurse practitioner, if it can be implemented in Sweden. I think there's a big need for it, but Sweden's very traditional and old timey, and they have a hard time starting new stuff like that. And Norway's already been working on it. Finland has already got it going. Denmark, it's hard to find the information on. But for some reason, Sweden's just got a lot of pushback on it compared to the other Scandinavian countries. So it's basically like in between a nurse and a doctor. So depending on where I live in America, I could have my own clinic. I could be almost like a doctor. I could assess patients, order labs, give medications, have my own clinic, depending on where I live in the States. I think there's 28 states in America that are unrestricted. Then there's a bunch that are restricted. And then there's another group that's like even more restricted, which is Texas was one of those. It's the most restricted, where you have to work like for a doctor, and they're always like checking everything that you do. Anyway, so I'm educated at that level. And then I went and got certified for, it's called acute care geriatric nurse practitioner. So it's like focused for acute care. So either the emergency room or like in the ICU, intensive care. But you can work anywhere in the hospital and in certain clinics, writing prescriptions for treatment and everything, assessing patients. And then I got my certification in diabetes. That took me about 2 years to get that. So I had all those things done. And then when I came to Sweden, I ended up having to take a knowledge test, kunskapsprov, to prove that I know what I'm doing. It was easy. The problem with the thing was more nursing theory, because there's a lot of like stuff that you'll never use. Like one of the questions literally was like, "What are the 6 S's of palliative care?" So it's like 6 S's, and they all stand for stuff like självständighet and um, smärtstillande. So it's like independence and pain management. And it's like you're never going to use that. It's just to pass a test. So there's a lot of that stuff. There's a lot of they're more focused out. So focused on medicine here. They're more focused on like omvårdnadsåtgärder, which is like nursing interventions. And so it was pretty common sense. There were some differences between how we do things in America and Sweden. Like when you put in a urinary catheter, some variation there. Like in America, this is funny. In America, we don't give anesthetic to put inside a urine catheter. We use gel, but no anesthesia. Sweden, they use anesthesia. But then there's other things that in Sweden they don't do anesthesia for, but then we do in America. So it's weird how, so you just have to like learn those kinds of things. Then let's see what else. Then I had to take a practical exam. So it's like I went to Gothenburg, and um, you're in front of teachers, nurses, and they're making sure you know how to do everything, and you have to do it all in Swedish. It's like do you know how to do a blood transfusion? Do you know how to take an odling or a sample for a bacteria culture? Do you know how to um, mix up a solution? So you actually have to do it like with a dummy or a docka. um, so yeah, that was interesting. But the hardest thing was it was not so much doing or knowing this stuff, is more the language thing. The language is a huge challenge. And then after you do that, then you have to do 3 months. It's called tjänstgöring. So it's like you go with a nurse who's like your handler for 3 months, and they make sure you learn the Swedish way. Then the last thing is you got to take, it's called a författningskunskap. So it's like on the laws and stuff here in Sweden, like patient safety laws and data laws and all that kind of stuff. And then you pay the fee and you get your nursing license. So that was a very long. I was gonna try to make it short, but it ended up being a long answer. Sorry about that. About what I had to do to get my nursing here in Sweden. So hopefully that's helpful. Let's see here if there's anything I've missed. Uh, Ida. Oh, yeah, I thought it was like in danger or something, your screen name, but you say your first name is Ida and the rest is just a comment on anonymity. Oh, gotcha. Okay, Ida, thank you. Zendra, you say the O6 corridor, the thought corridor or the opinion corridor, right? Very narrow, drives me mad, especially if you don't follow the mainstream opinions regarding most things. Yeah. That's a difficult subject for me to talk about. I do find some challenges there. I think being an introvert and being more of to myself about a lot of stuff, which is funny because people see my channel and they think I'm not that way just because I put videos out. But generally speaking, a lot of people like at work, they're like, say something. uh, but that's not really in my nature. I tend to be more of a listener and an observer. But I see it being a big challenge for a lot of people, even Swedes. Like I said, with O6 corridor, Swedes, I think they know because I'm an American, they can tell me whatever, but they're scared to say something to their family, their friends, the workmates, because they're afraid. It's like that tall poppy syndrome thing. They're afraid to be different. And I think it makes, especially the ones I hear it most from is people on the spectrum, like autism or ADHD, or people that have maybe bipolar or something like that, because we don't fit the, 80%, we're in that 20% or less group. And so we are abnormal. And so it can be a bit of a challenge navigating things. One of the biggest things I notice with me is I tend to be quite honest. And there's a lot of, I feel like, how shall I package this? Like you shouldn't say that. We can't talk about that. And it's nothing political, it's nothing religious or anything. It's just like um you like you're joking or being humorous, and it's just like you feel like you're kind of just like, well, like if, for example, where I come from in Texas, we make a lot of jokes that are like religiously toned, especially in the hospital. It's a bit of a dark humor, but it's a way we cope with, working as a nurse is very stressful. You're dealing with death and dying all the time, a lot of stress. And so you develop a sense of humor, but it's kind of like, I feel like you're having to walk in eggshells here. You can't have that kind of humor that would be funny in the States. Humor is a very sensitive thing. And it's just like, well, we can't talk about that, like, because there are people here that are not religious and they may be offended if you say something about someone going to see Jesus. And it's like, it's just a joke, right? But it's just things like that. It's just like so much concern about what other people think. But I don't know. That's just, yeah. Where are we at now here in the comments section? I think I'm caught up. So, anyways, yeah. What do y'all think about? I would love to hear y'all's take because the next video I'm working on has to do, like I said, with differences of nursing in Sweden versus United States. Some examples I'm going to give is like one of them has to do with in Sweden, charting is a lot easier. We do not document hardly anything in Sweden compared to America. Like in America, you spend a large portion of your day on the computer charting. You here in Sweden, there's a lot of what we would call in English charting by exception. So you chart only the stuff that's abnormal. You don't chart the normal. Whereas in some instances, most of the, not all, but most of the departments I worked in, you had to chart not just by exception, but you had to chart that you at least had checked out. Like, for example, let's say they're having no trouble urinary wise. You still had to put WNL, which is like within normal limits, which means that you looked at it. Because if you didn't chart within normal limits, then it means you didn't look at it. It doesn't apply to all departments, like, say, surgery, because they're very focused on you had the surgery on this body part. And so they only chart that one thing. But if it's like the floor or what you would call in Swedish the avdelning, then there's a huge difference in charting there. Another big thing is we are pretty much paperless, virtually paperless in America. Sweden still uses this weird mix, and they all have all these different charting systems. I actually have an interview coming up with a guy who's actually involved in the whole Millennium situation, which is the name of the computer documentation system that I got a lot of flack from Swedish people on my platform because people are like almost like blaming me that some American charting system didn't work in Gothenburg or something like that. And I'm like, I don't even never even heard of the system that you're talking about. And I just felt like it was very, very hyperbolic. So anyway, I met somebody who's one of my followers. He's actually an informaticist and a IT guy who works in the hospital that deals with this and was involved in that whole situation. So he's agreed to be on the video. So I'm looking forward to interviewing him and hearing his perspective. I think that's the best way to teach people is through interviews so that they don't just hear it just from some American guy here with a baseball cap talking about, his feelings, but actually interviewing people so that people see that this, a lot of different perspectives. But kind of what he was saying about the charting thing, he said the problem was the hospitals where it got implemented, they tried to implement it throughout the whole entire hospital, and then like everything just crashed, which is not what we do in the States. And people are like saying, well, it's because it's an American system, it didn't work. And it's like, no, there's a lot more nuance to that. And I remember I was actually what's called a super user when we went live with the computer systems, and we only did like one department at a time, and then we would know it would work. Then they would make super users from there, and then they would go several months later to another department. And it took years before all the departments, went live with these systems. Then they didn't go live with every single detail. They kept adding things kind of like Legos, brick by brick, they would add different aspects to it. Whereas here in Sweden, it's just like, boom, nutrition and the nursing and the doctors and all these departments just immediately, just everything was on it and it just crashed. It didn't work and they had a lot of problems. So I do want to kind of talk about some things like that. Um, some other differences, like I mentioned about just procedure wise, putting in a urinary catheter, like in America, we use iodine to cleanse the penis when we're going to put in a catheter, as long as the person doesn't have an iodine allergy. It's for sterilization uses. I found out there's other countries that do that too as well, but Sweden doesn't. Then Sweden gives gel that's got I think xylocaine in it, which is like a numbing agent. We don't do that. We just use gel. There's a thing called, I think it's called Fehring's test when you put it in. Never had heard about that. Differences on giving injections. Here in Sweden, they do this thing where they like put the needle in to give an IM injection, I think it is. And then you like draw back to see if you get blood. If you don't get blood, then you turn the needle 180 degrees and then you draw back again to make sure there's no blood. And then you can give the injection. A lot of little nuanced stuff like that that's different. We all have access to the same research, but it's interpreted differently, from country to country. So hopefully that kind of information will be helpful to people. Let's see here. Do, 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 do. Didn't used to be like that here. Zindra, when you say it didn't used to be like the hair, I'm guessing you mean about the O6 corridor. Let's see. DW7563. Saw your taco recommendation, Gothenburg. Got to try it. I've been working a lot in Colorado. Oh, that's awesome. And the Mexican food there is outstanding. Alfredo's tacos just can't compare to the others there. Have you been anywhere else in the United States, DAW, to have Mexican food besides Colorado? Because what I have found, I don't know what your experience is, but I have found that the Mexican food tastes different in every state. So my experience in the past was Mexican food was a little bit sweeter in Colorado, smokier tasting in New Mexico, and more spicy in Texas. And then California has like its own kind of, it's like this fusion kind of thing. That was kind of my experience. Let's see here. It's interesting. Maybe do a funny Swedish versus American tacos video. Yeah, I had some ideas, but I'm a little afraid. As like I said about the whole O6 quarter and people getting their feet hurt, their feet stepped on. I saw something. I don't know if y'all seen the videos of white people taco night. White people taco night, and it's like showing these like white people making tacos in America. Because a lot of my Mexican friends would make fun of us Americans that would make tacos, and like, that's not really a real taco, and they call them white people tacos. But it's like, I'm afraid to do anything like that because I don't want to like get like canceled or like banned from, YouTube just because I said white people tacos. It's like, you never know. It's hard to take the pulse on the politically correct climate here. Let's see here. Let's see. I think Mexican food, like it is served in some parts of the US, would really be a hit in Sweden, but so far, all I've tested have fallen short. Yeah, I know what you mean. It's really hard to find good places, so that's why I'm always looking for good stuff. I also find a lot of places people recommend have obviously never lived in America or Mexico for that matter. One of the other weird things to me is just like just how much variation there is among Latin culture because like I work with a lot of people from Latin America and they're not familiar with any of the food that I'm familiar with, that would be related to Mexican. So that's been kind of an interesting thing. Let's see here. Grumpy Pants, did you have to take all those nursing medical exams in Swedish? Also, did you study Swedish before moving? Yeah, all the exams were in Swedish and they were not multiple choice. They were, it depends on where you do it. I did the first time was in Kalmar and it was by hand with a pencil. You had to write out everything. Then the second time I did it on the computer in Gothenburg. Um, so yeah. And then what was the other thing you asked about Swedish? I did not start studying Swedish. I had a lot on my plate because I was trying to get my master's degree before going to Sweden. So I did not really have the time or energy or resources to be studying Swedish. I was just trying to hurry up during it was a COVID pandemic. So I was working my butt off. So just trying to survive as a nurse and get my master's degree and get everything ready to move to Sweden. It happened pretty fast. So I didn't know anything except for hey and tack så mycket. That's all I knew. So I learned enough Swedish in 11 months to pass the thesis and which is like a high school level Swedish. And then I got my first job in 11 months in home health. Let's see here. Sounds like see Ida's saying sounds like Sweden do it quick and all over with no control and no feedback. Let's see here. DAW says US Mexican food is not healthy at all. Something to keep in mind. Not necessarily true. There is a lot of very healthy Mexican food. I'm not sure what you have in mind, but there are grilled fish tacos that you can do. There are you know, for example, there's a lot of soups and stews. There's a lot of grilled meat. One of my favorite things is carne asada. So it's like grilled meat with a hot sauce type thing that they make from fresh, served with cactus. You don't see that stuff here in Sweden, but that is like authentic food, like authentic Mexican food. You're not going to find that anywhere in Sweden. So yeah, fajitas, it's just like, rice, beans, grilled vegetables. It'd be like, getting Middle Eastern food or Greek food. There's a lot of similarity. The grilled meats with the grilled vegetables and wrap it in a tortilla and guacamole and stuff like that. So no, there's a lot of healthy Mexican food and American Mexican food. Just depends on where you go and what you order, just like anything. But it is still worth it, as you say. Even if you get the unhealthy. I tell you the unhealthy thing that I miss though, there is some unhealthy stuff. Queso, which is not like queso in Swedish. Queso is like cottage cheese, but queso and America and Mexico, it's like melted cheese with like spices. Sometimes it has chili, like chili con carne. So sorry, my eyes are like burning. I don't know. The air is so dry, I think, from the heater in the house. So I keep scratching my eyes and my nose. Regarding the jokes, says Zindra, we used to be able to joke about most things. Nowadays, not like that. Yeah. Yeah, because like when I'll give you an example, and I apologize. Y'all let me know if this is offensive. I don't mean to, but this will be a good way on this live stream to kind of gauge humor here in Sweden. We have had patients that are very old. When I say very old, I mean like 95 to 105, and they've lived a long, good life. And all of a sudden, usually people like that, they lived a long, healthy, good life, and then they they go pretty fast. They come in the hospital and they have a major stroke or they're the heart attack or something like that. And it's like there's nothing else we can do. We've done everything we can do. But the family, I don't know how it is in Sweden, but the family in America reserves the right to make the decision depending on the legal documentation that the person had. If the person had documentation of what they want, then we can't do anything. And it depends on state to state too. That's another thing. Um, so we have to look at all those aspects. But what you find a lot of times is the children just cannot let go of the family member. And so what they end up doing is making choices that becomes an ethical problem for us nurses or doctors because we're like, this is not the ethically right thing to do for the patient because we're torturing them. We need to let the person go in peace and with dignity. And so like in America, you have what's called, in Swedish it's HLR, hjärt-lungräddning, or in English, should be CPR. So, doing chest compressions, intubation, giving medications. There's like, I think, five different things that the person has to decide on that they're okay or not okay with about life sustaining treatments. And so, like, I've had cases where the patient is just like, literally, I had one that was 101 years old, very frail, had a major stroke, is not going to get better. And the family said, "We want you to do everything. We want chest compressions." And so it became an ethical thing for us because it's like we didn't feel comfortable doing it, but that's the law and that was what was decided. And the patient had made them the decision makers. And they're like, well, we have this religious belief that, you have to do everything. And so there were some jokes about you need to let them go see Jesus, right? And that's kind of how a lot of nurses in America will deal with stress and difficult situations is they'll make jokes like that, be not in front of the patient, right? And they're not going to do that to the family members. But it's like such a stressful, difficult situation that to diffuse that stress or whatever, there are jokes like that. But it's like you can't, my experience is you can't make jokes like that, you know, in the workplace, even though it's with your coworkers, not in front of the patient and not in front of the family members. Uh, so it's interesting dynamics. I actually saw we had a interesting discussion about that one day because one of the same nurses that said that because I worked with some other people that were from English speaking lands, and so we just have this humor and we understand the humor, we get the humor. It's kind of this dark humor, and then there's another coworker who's Middle Eastern. So the Swedish person basically was getting on to us saying, well, they don't believe in God and they're offended by these jokes about Jesus. But then all of a sudden, then they start saying things about ghosts. So then my coworker who's Muslim calls her out on it and says, okay, you say you're an atheist. You have a problem with them making a joke about Jesus, but then you are talking about ghosts, but you don't believe in. So it is interesting, and I still have not figured out how to navigate that. I'm still working on it. Maybe you've got tips for me on that kind of stuff, but humor is an interesting thing. My coworker from Sweden that I spend the most time with at work, older woman, um, she said she worked in Norway for a long time, for years, and she said even with Norway and Sweden, there's a huge difference in humor. And she said that took a couple years for her, even though she understood Norwegian and stuff. She said it was really hard for her to get a grasp on Norwegian humor. So humor is a very interesting, sensitive thing. Let's see what we got going on here in the comments here. DAW says, I had Mexican food in San Diego too. Otherwise, no. Let's see. Pella Jones, Sweden needs nurses. Happy you helping people move here. Oh, thank you, Pella. That's really kind of you. Appreciate that. Michael Velton. Hey, Michael, what's up? Nice to see you online here. Looking forward to doing an interview with you soon. Be nice to have you on the channel. So you're eating chicken nuggets. Shouldn't. It's been about a year since last time. Spicy ketchup. Yeah, nice. Yeah, you gotta have a little fun every now and then, right? For psychological well-being. Um, DAW, what I meant with unhealthy was some dishes are drenched in melted cheese. Yeah, yeah, I know where you're going with that. Rice, carbs, yeah, large portions, and since it tastes so good, you wipe the plate clean. Yes, sir, or ma'am, or well, maybe I shouldn't do that. That's another thing. Is like I come from Texas, and we're used to saying, even when we're joking, we'll be yes, sir, or yes, ma'am, and it's just like, yeah, can't do stuff like that here in Sweden either. Don't want to offend anybody. A lot of times it's just humorous thing. Um, DAW says I tend to eat too much when I eat United States Mexican food. That's all. Yes, I totally know what you mean. It just tastes so good and you just can't stop. I have a funny story about that. So I was a diabetes educator in America for 4 years before coming to Sweden. Now I work with diabetes, but a different department with diabetes related issues here in Sweden. And one of the challenges we dealt with a lot of the Mexican population, they have, I mean, higher rates of diabetes. Last time I checked, they have a higher rate of diabetes than Americans do. And they eat a lot of, I shouldn't say they, proportionally, they have higher consumption of carbs, lots of soda. Conversations I had, and they're not all, of course, I had to make this caveat, they're not all like this, but working in the diabetes field, it was very common to meet ones that said, they thought that orange soda was good for you because it contained vitamin C. Um, so interesting things like that. Uh, they had a hard time understanding the concept of carbs because tortillas contain carbs. And basically, like on average, one tortilla was one serving of carb, which is 15 grams of carb. And depending on, the guidelines, typically, I didn't recommend for breakfast more than 30 to 45 grams of carb for breakfast, 45 to 60 for lunch, and 45 for 60 for dinner, which was the standard guidelines at the time. And maybe a 15-gram carb snack once a day. So it's pretty generous, actually. So, like one tortilla would be 15. So, for breakfast, you could have maybe two corn tortillas, some eggs, and beans, like kind of Mexican sort of stuff. And so we would be counting up the carbs, and it's like, well, you're only getting 45, but you're looking at the person, you're like, obviously they're eating more carbs than that. And their blood sugar is just like, I kid you not, by Swedish numbers, we're talking, 25, 26, blood glucose levels. And you're just like, man, what is it? And then you finally find out they're not counting their tortillas. And what I found out was they use they view the tortilla as a utensil, like a eating utensil, because you like sop up the food with it. And so they didn't count that because they're thinking of it like a spoon or a fork. You're like, no, you got to count the tortillas because each tortilla is like 15 grams of carb. It's so fascinating, isn't it? Um, in Sweden, they don't educate you about type 2 diabetes diet. Oh, that's fascinating. My mom, she's got diabetes. I'm so proud of her. She does such a good job with her diabetes control. In fact, when she goes and the doctor says, "You don't have diabetes anymore." I'm like, "Mom, you do. If we give you like a soda and check your blood sugar a little bit later, it's obviously going to be high." But she exercises, she eats low carbs, um, you know, cooks almost everything at home, lives a good life, gardening and has her little hobbies and stuff like that. Um, but it just comes down to good education, and I'm shocked here in Sweden. I just had in my mind, I viewed like America's down here and Sweden is like way up here on everything. I just had this very rosy colored view. And what I find is it's the same thing here in Sweden. The amount of carb consumption in Sweden is just outrageous. The bread and the cinnamon buns and the princess torta and Moose and Lisk, and it's like those things are good and fun. You should be able to have them as long as it's in moderation. But it's I think it just comes down to they just don't people just don't know. I mean, I didn't know. I was a nurse and we had a little bit of education on nutrition my first semester in nursing. We learned a lot about like what vitamins are in broccoli and what vitamins are in cantaloupe and squash. And if you're trying to help your patient with calcium or potassium issues. What do you give them? That sort of thing. But we didn't really focus on like carbs, fat, and protein. And I'm seeing the same thing here in Sweden. A lot of people don't know. Um, let's see. Yeah, the comment here about eating a lot of candy. That's another crazy thing. I never ate that much candy. I had my first piece of candy at the age of 4. My mom was very strict. We got fruit and raisins. That was our candy. And everything was fresh, you know. But then, you know, you start getting around other kids and they're eating candy and it's like kind of hard to explain, you know. So, but my mom was very strict about the candy thing, and I'm really grateful for that. Um, so yeah. Comment here, DAW. My son is 16, prefers sugar-free drinks, but not sugar-free candy. Oh, that's fascinating. Michael, when I got eye problems, they said I maybe should talk to someone about diet. I did. Yeah, that's good. I learned so much. Like I did not understand. You know, there's things I thought were healthy, like granola or granola bar, and then you find that there is a. It's not that you can't have it. It's all about you got to count your carbs. And I'm gonna be honest, I eat too many carbs. I love carbs, and I have autism, so it's like I have a hard time changing habits. It's not that I can't, but it's very difficult for me more than I think a neurotypical person would. And I think from all the stress, you know, you come home from being a nurse after a stressful day's work, um, your brain needs carbs, and so you crave carbs, and, you know, and then your stress levels are high, your cortisol levels are high, and then they crash, and then you need to replenish your carbs. So it's just like this never-ending cycle that I'm trying to work on because I know my weight. I'm not obese. I think my BMI is 26 or 27, so I'm like just right over the threshold for being overweight. And I know from experience that cutting carbs helps, but every time I get stressed, then I end up eating more bread, you know, and it's just like it's, you know, it's tough. And then you got your coworkers and they're always like, "Oh, I baked this here," and you don't want to be rude, and then you get like patients who are so sweet and they bake cakes and cookies and stuff, you know, it's just like really tough. I think the biggest thing for me is I don't want to hurt people's feelings, you know, so I just eat whatever's put in front of me, you know. Michael, 7 months on low carb, but it could be too late. I don't think it's ever too late. You can reverse some damage if you've done some damage. You definitely can reverse it. You can also put the brakes on further damage in the future. Um, you know, by cutting down on your carbs. Um, you may not be able to completely reverse everything. You know, like if you've got renal failure or some things like that, you can improve it a bit and then put the brakes on, but maybe not completely totally reverse some stuff. So it's worth it. It's worth it. DAW, I'm a sucker for hidden carbs, especially bread, makor, yum yum. 100% agreed. You know, today is Friday, and every Friday we get free breakfast at work. They give us fresh bread from Mormor's Baggery, mother's, grandma's bakery, basically in English. And you know, it's all this that's what we get, you know, it's like lots of big pieces of bread and, you know, cheese and butter and, you know, sandwich stuff for breakfast. And it's like, yeah. Michael says, my eyes are the problem. I totally hear you. I'm one of those worst, like I go grocery shopping when I'm hungry after work, and it's like, this was really not smart. Zindra says, I think you need to work on the not being rude thing and not being afraid of saying no and hold your ground. Both regarding general opinions and cake. I got you. I'll take that to the heart, Zindra. Yeah. Well, it's been really nice getting to chat with you. I wasn't sure if there would be anybody able to come online tonight. So thank you all, guys. Speaking of all this diet and carbs, I'm gonna go to the gym. Today is leg day, so I am going to be doing that. So we're coming up on an hour here. So I think I'm going to shut her down and call it quits. But thank you guys so much, as always, for joining. And I hope y'all have an awesome, wonderful night. AW, I'm 50, so any man above 40, I'd recommend doing a health check. I did a year ago and now eat medicine for blood pressure, blood fats. Should probably have checked that 20 years ago. Yeah, but you know how we are, DAW. We are Superman and we think there's nothing wrong with us and it will be just fine, right? Yeah. Yeah. Take care, Michael. Um, Ida went to Elsa Pedagogan instead of the dietist, and she said that counting calories or dieting is too much work for a tired autistic brain, and we get burnout from that. Instead, she said we should stick to. Oh, I want to see what the rest of this that you write here is. I'm gonna wait for this before I shut it down. Yeah, that I don't think because like I've tried to get with a personal trainer and I find it overwhelming and stressful, and then I go the other direction. So it's like I need like gentle dieting, you know. Bye, take care, Schluter. You Talrix Modellen. Yeah, I think you're right. So the it's called in English the small the plate method where you divide up your carbs and your starch, your vegetable, and your protein. Yeah. Take care, Ida. Well, I'm gonna let you guys go. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for tonight. Nice chatting with you guys. Y'all are awesome.